This is the Launchkey MK4 by Novation, a keyboard controller that lets you play, drum, mix songs with popular DAWs like Ableton, Logic, Cubase, Reason, and they've added new features we haven't seen before on keyboard controllers, including curated chord sets. Yes, instant inspiration built into this keyboard, and some new arpeggiator modes. And for Ableton users, the ability to sequence beats. Let's take a look at all the features, the competition, and the coolest new music making tools this keyboard has. The Launchkey comes in a bunch of different sizes, and they've added a variation that you've been asking for. I'm using the 49 key Launchkey right now, but it also comes with 61 keys, 37 keys, and 25 keys. All those have full-size keys and nearly identical feature sets. However, only the 49 and 61 key versions come with faders and the buttons below them. Well, the keybeds differ a bit too, I'll get to that in a sec. They've also released two mini versions with 25 keys and 37 keys. I've covered the Launchkey Mini in a separate video, I'll link it below. If you're considering a new MIDI controller this size, you might be also looking at the Keylab Essential from Arturia, the Oxygen Pro from M Audio, or the Native Instruments A series. All those keyboards are the budget offerings from those companies, so the prices are similar to this. But I will cover some other key differences in this video. And if you're interested in getting the Launchkey MK4 or any of the keyboards, I'll put links below the video. And hey, I want to thank Analog Cases for sponsoring this video. If you struggle to get your gear at the right angle or just want a nicer way to manage your setup, Analog Cases makes these things, which you've probably seen on my channel before. It's called the XTS Desktop Stand system, and it's great for using with lots of stuff around your studio or while performing. You can configure this in two ways, with the optional flex tray or without it. So put some pedals on this to accompany your synth or an audio interface. And without the tray, it's a streamlined stand for your drum machine, or hey, even another synth. These are made from solid sheet metal, so they're very strong, and you can adjust the length easily. Oh, and they come in two different sizes as well, so whatever you've got, they probably have a size for you. These stands are very affordable, so it's a small investment for a really nice look and convenience in your studio. If you're interested in the XTS Stands by Analog Cases, I'll add links in the video description. So let's talk about the new Keybed on the Launchkey 49 and 61. But first, this is a MIDI controller that you use with your computer to play software-based virtual instruments, control your DAW, and you can play hardware synths as well with the MIDI out port. It does not have sounds built in. Okay, the Launchkey MK4 49 and 61 key keyboards have semi-weighted keys with velocity sensitivity. No aftertouch on this keyboard, but that's expected at this price point. The 25 and 37 key versions of this keyboard have synth action keyboards, so they're a little different. The keys feel fine. There are better keybeds out there, but it's on par with the competition. The keys on the 49 and 61 have a waterfall design. You may like that, but it doesn't make a difference to me. The keys feel a bit on the light side with a quick bounce back that makes them feel a little light, but hey, you get what you pay for. I will say that I kind of like them more than the Arturia Keylab Essential keys. There's a nice intentional feel to the key press. You can also adjust the velocity curve of the keys and the pads. The pads are velocity sensitive with poly aftertouch. Yes, the pads have poly aftertouch, but no aftertouch on the keys. There are multiple pad banks, so you can play larger kits. These pads have lots of additional functions like triggering clips in Ableton Live, sequencing, and selecting modes. I'll show you those later. The layout of the Launchkey MK4 has its pros and cons. First, the good stuff. They put the faders on the left side, which is great. Faders on the left means you can be playing something with your right and adjusting track volumes or something else with the faders with your left hand. Remember, you have faders on the 49 and 61 key Launchkeys only, and that goes for the buttons here as well. These buttons can be used to arm tracks, select tracks, and also used for fader modes and keyboard layers. To the left of the faders, you have your pitch and mod wheels and octave up and down, and if you hold Shift, the octave keys can transpose. In the center, you have a new OLED screen. Yeah, it's pretty small and not very enjoyable to read. I'm disappointed that Novation didn't give us a bigger screen on the new Launchkey. Artuaria's Keylab Essential has a bigger screen that's easier to read when there's so much that these keyboards can show these days. Below the screen, you have a settings button and the shift key, track navigation, and buttons for scale, chord, arp, and fixed chord. To the right, you have 8 endless encoders. I'm so happy that they went with the endless encoders this time. Definitely a good move. To the right of the encoders, you have an up and down button to navigate encoder banks. Below that, you have 16 pads with the pad bank navigation and the scene trigger button for Ableton, as well as a function button for secondary pad modes. And then to the far right, you have Capture MIDI, which is an Ableton-specific feature, undo, quantize, metronome, and transport controls, play, stop, record, and loop on-off. I don't like the placement of the transport controls. I wish they were closer to the center, so you don't have to reach far when you're playing. Also, you don't have forward and rewind buttons, which are present on the Keylab Essential and Oxygen Pro keyboards. And the Launchkey is also missing a dedicated save button and tap tempo. You may also miss the note repeat button that's available on the Oxygen Pro. I'm glad Novation included a screen, but given its size, I can't say that it's a major improvement over previous Launchkeys, but it is easier to read than the previous model. And having a screen gives you feedback from your DAW. You can see fader, volume levels, plugin parameters, and your track names. It would have been nice to have a larger screen with contextual buttons, which would give Novation the option of updating features that would display on the screen in the future. You can adjust screen brightness in the settings menu. All right, I'm going to cover DAW integration, which is quite extensive. But first, I want to go through some super interesting new and improved tools they built into this keyboard: scale, arp, and chord. And hey, if this video is helpful or informative, can you take 5 seconds to hit the subscribe button? It's totally free and it would mean the world to me because it makes a huge difference in the content and value I bring to you. Scale mode on the Launchkey MK4 is a useful tool that helps you stay within a specific musical key as you play. This feature can be useful if you're experimenting with different scales or want to ensure that your note fits harmonically with the rest of your track. You can select from lots of scales such as major, minor, Dorian. There's a lot here. The first encoder selects the root note, the second encoder selects the type of scale, and the third adjusts the mode. There are 3 modes available: snap to scale, filter out, and easy scale. In snap to scale mode, any note you play that isn't in the selected scale will automatically be adjusted to the nearest note within the scale. The filter out of scale mode takes a different approach by not playing any notes that fall outside the chosen scale. The easy scale mode simplifies playing by mapping all the notes of your chosen scale to the white keys only. Let's try a more complex scale for this one. The scale features on the Launchkey MK4 are nice when you're composing, performing, or just exploring new stuff. And if you set the scale on the Launchkey, it sends that info to Ableton Live and sets the global scale there as well. The arpeggiator, or ARP, on the Launchkey MK4 is a feature that we've seen before on the previous model, but they've actually given us a very comprehensive ARP tool here and added some interesting features like an ARP sequencer. When you activate the ARP, the encoders give you different options for the arpeggiator. You can adjust tempo, you can also sync it to your DAW or MIDI clock. You have swing, rate, gate, modes for up, down, random, etc. There's even a chord type where all notes play simultaneously on each step. And a strum mode that emulates the way chords are strummed on a guitar. You use the modulation wheel to activate each note. I haven't seen this before on a keyboard controller. Let me know if you've seen it. You can also control the number of octaves over which the arpeggios play. You've got mutate and deviate next as well, which lets you create rhythmic patterns by adding rests within the arpeggio. This can turn a basic ARP into something far more complex and interesting. It's perfect for creating evolving textures in your music. Now it gets even more interesting with the ARP pattern. The ARP pattern feature on the Launchkey MK4 gives you hands-on control over the individual steps of your arpeggios. This feature allows you to transform a basic arpeggio into something more interesting. When you activate the ARP pattern mode, each of the Launchkey's pads represents a step in the arpeggio sequence. You can turn these steps on or off to create custom rhythmic patterns. Also, this feature includes controls for adding accents, ties, and ratchets to your sequence. Press the pads below the sequence to add them, and the function button to change the mode. Accents increase the velocity of specific steps, making those notes stand out more in the pattern. Ties allow you to extend the length of a note by connecting it to the next step, creating a smoother, more legato feel. Ratchets subdivide a step into multiple triggers, adding rapid-fire repetitions. All these extras really take the ARP features to a new level that we don't usually see on MIDI controllers. I think they're a fun creative tool and go beyond what ARP features you might have included in your DAW. I think Novation did a good job with this ARP feature. What do you think? And do these extra scale ARP and chord features really matter to you? But wait a second, there's more. Chords. The Launchkey MK4 comes with some very unique chord features that can really help you in making music, especially when it comes to creating harmonies and complex chord progressions. And in my opinion, Novation has gone above and beyond what other keyboards offer here. There are three main chord modes: chord map, fixed chord, and user chord. The most interesting of these is the chord map mode. This mode is all about exploration. It allows you to select a scale and then gives you access to a range of chords that fit within that scale. The Launchkey's pads are used to trigger these chords. The chords play on the blue pads. And you can manipulate them further using the encoders to adjust parameters like chord spread and inversion. The first two encoders are called Adventure and Explore, and they just pretty much adjust the chord sets to change the complexity. This mode is great for experimenting with different harmonic ideas and discovering new progressions that you might not have thought of on your own. And the orange pads also change the way the chords are played. Hold down one of them and then keep pressing a blue chord, and you get some interesting variations in how the chords play. I love inspiring chord tools like this, but in what I consider a major oversight, the chords do not feed the arpeggiator. It would be so cool to have these chords activated along with the ARP feature. Maybe they can do it in a firmware update. This is not a deal breaker, but it is a limitation of such an excellent feature on this keyboard. Now, we have seen some great chord inspiration features like this on Native Instruments keyboards. Well, not really the keyboard. It's built into their software complete control. They have chord sets like this, but you have to be running the software to use them. Novation actually built the chord sets into the Launchkey MK4, which is even better. Okay, we have two more chord modes. User mode allows you to create and store your own custom chords. You can assign a specific chord to each pad by playing the notes you want directly on the keyboard. This is useful if you have a few go-to chords that you use frequently in your tracks. Next is fixed chord mode. In this mode, you can play a chord on the keyboard and then lock it in so that every key you press afterwards will play the same chord, just transposed to different pitches. I think Novation went above and beyond with the ARP and chord modes specifically. I think these are some great tools that are actually useful when coming up with creative musical ideas. All right, let's get to the DAW Control next. The Launchkey MK4 has custom scripts for Ableton Live, Logic Pro, Cubase, Reason, and FL Studio. And you can use the HUI protocol for Reaper, Pro Tools, and Studio One. Let's cover Ableton Live first because Launchkey really covers a lot for Ableton, more than any other DAW, but I'm glad they're expanding now to more DAWs. And new for Ableton is the step sequencer, which is so useful. For Ableton Live, of course, you've got transport controls, play, stop, and record, loop on and off, metronome, quantize, and the undo button. And you also have capture MIDI. This is a feature in Ableton that allows you to capture what you were playing on the keyboard even if you weren't recording. The faders control mixer volumes by default, and of course you've got clip and scene triggering. When you put the pads in mixer mode, you can use the bottom row to stop clips, mute, and solo tracks. So you can launch clips, stop them, or even record new clips directly from the Launchkey. And the pads match the colors in live. This setup is ideal for live performances or when you're building up ideas in session view. Navigating scenes is easy with the track and clip selection buttons. You can move between tracks using the track buttons and select different clips within those tracks using the pad up and down buttons. There are multiple encoder modes on the Launchkey. In plugin mode, the encoders give you direct access to the parameters of the currently selected device or instrument. You can tweak effects, adjust synth settings, and more, all without needing to touch your mouse. And of course, you see the parameter of what you're adjusting here as well. You can switch between banks of controls to access all available settings for that instrument in Ableton as well. These encoders can also be used to adjust pans for the mixer and also sends as well. On the 25 and 37 key Launchkey, since you don't have faders, you'll use these encoders to handle the track volume levels. Now, there's also a transport encoder mode, which is interesting too. This mode allows you to scrub through your arrangement, zoom in and out, and adjust loop start and endpoints. You can also use it to navigate between markers that you've set up in your project. It's easier to jump between sections of your track this way. In Ableton Live's pad mode, you have three main options: clip, sequencer, and drum. Clip mode lets you launch and control clips, as I mentioned earlier. Sequencer mode gives you the ability to step sequence MIDI notes directly from the Launchkey on a 16-step sequence. This is great for creating drum patterns or even melodic sequences. Shift and DAW changes from clip to sequencer mode. So load a drum kit and a blank clip, press play, press a keyboard key that corresponds to a drum sound you want, and then press the pads to start adding those into the sequence. You can also adjust velocity and length by holding one of the pads in the sequence and then moving the encoders. And you can change the length, move notes, and even nudge them. You can use this same sequencer feature with melodies. I can't tell you how happy I am to see this sequencer feature on the Launchkey. If you have a longer clip, you can see additional sequence pages using the down arrow. This is such a nice feature for Ableton Live users, given that Ableton doesn't really give you a great way to sequence beats already. Novation always covers Ableton Live very well on their Launchkeys, so how about other DAWs? Let's explore Logic next. You have transport controls, of course, and mixer controls, which allows you to adjust levels, pan, and other mixer functions directly from the Launchkey. Once in mixer mode, the encoders are mapped to control the volume and pans for your tracks. And you also have EQ control as well, which is really nice. When you switch to a plugin mode, the encoders control the parameters of the selected plugin or instrument. Another really cool feature is the Live Loops mode, which lets you control Logic Pro's Live Loops feature directly from the Launchkey. Now, the Launchkey Mark IV will control FL Studio, but honestly, if you're an FL Studio user, you might want to check out their dedicated keyboard for FL, the FL Key. That gives you lots of control and the ability to sequence beats using FL's channel rack. But with the Launchkey, you still have lots of control. Mixer volumes, pan, as well as plugin control, and transport works as well. If you're a Cubase user, you'll get mixer controls with faders for volume, pans, transport controls, EQ control, and you can use the pads to arm, mute, and solo. Now, although the Launchkey can control some of your DAW's stock plugins, there is something missing. Dedicated virtual instrument control, like we've seen on Arturia and Native Instruments keyboards. Both Arturia and Native Instruments give you tight integration with their own software, namely Analog Lab and Complete Control, respectively. This means you can browse presets, load them, and then tweak parameters. When keyboards have that kind of integration, it makes exploring sounds in a much larger sound library much more enjoyable. That is missing from the Launchkey, so if you're a heavy user of Arturia's virtual instruments or Contact, you'll want to explore what Arturia and Native Instruments have to offer when it comes to that type of virtual instrument integration. I really like that kind of integration, but given that Novation is not a big name in software instruments, they really can only give us stock plugin control, as I showed you before. Okay, we have a few more features to cover, including layers, zones, build quality, and connectivity. On the Launchkey 49 and 61, you have the ability to split the keyboard into different sections, or to layer multiple sounds or MIDI channels on top of each other. To create layers, you assign multiple sounds or MIDI channels to the same range of keys. When you press a key, all the assigned sounds are triggered. I haven't showed you everything in the settings menu. There's lots here, including setting MIDI channels for keys, drums, velocity curves, aftertouch, and pad and screen brightness. The build quality on the Launchkey Mark IV is pretty much on par with what we've seen before. This is not made to be a premium keyboard, it's on the budget side of things. The knobs feel really good, and I really like the button press. It actually feels premium. That's my favorite part of the build. It's very little travel and very little noise. The faders are my least favorite. They are a bit too light to the touch, although resistance is on par with the faders on the Arturia Keylab Essential. I feel like the Oxygen Pro series from M-Audio feels a little better as far as build goes. On the back, you have a MIDI out and a sustain pedal port and the USB-C connector. Nothing much here, but it's good that they included that MIDI out because those chord and ARP features would be really nice to use on an external hardware synth. Novation has included a very interesting software package with the new Launchkeys. Truly unique stuff here. You have a few effects from Clevgrand, some G4 synths, and even an orchestral bundle from Orchestral Tools. You also get Ableton Live Lite. Good stuff to start making music with, and very different from other companies. So how does the Launchkey Mark IV compare to the competition? Well, I really think they've given us a lot with this new keyboard. They've covered the top DAWs, given us that Ableton Live sequencing feature, and the new chord and ARP tools are really nice, above and beyond what we usually see on budget MIDI controllers. If you're an Ableton user, you get outstanding control of Ableton Live with clip and scene triggering and everything. Now, if you're looking for virtual instrument integration, you'll get better control with Arturia and Native Instruments. Of course, that's with their own plugins. And Arturia will give you a bigger screen on their Keylab Essential. It's worth noting what features you're most interested in before making a decision when comparing these keyboards. And if you're looking for a more portable version of this keyboard, don't miss my full review of the mini version, which comes in 25 and 37 keys. Fewer controls, but many of the same features. I really like what Novation has done with the new Launchkey Mark IV. They've leveled up the features for Ableton Live users, which are their core base for years, and have really given us chord and ARP features that can be used with any DAW or even external synths. Now, Novation, give us a premium version of this with a bigger screen. When's the next SL keyboard coming out? If you have any questions about the Launchkey, leave them in the comments below. If you're interested in checking out any of the keyboards I mentioned in this video, I'll add links below. And hey, if you're looking for my latest keyboard review, watch the video right here. Keep making the music you love, and I'll see you soon.